There is a question that most people never stop to ask, even as they spend decades working, earning, spending, worrying, and repeating the same cycles year after year. The question is simple, yet quietly unsettling. It is this: what is money really for? Most of us grow up believing that money exists to solve problems, to buy comfort, to create freedom, or to signal success. We are told that more money means more safety, more control, more possibility. And so we begin the long journey of earning without ever fully examining the deeper exchange taking place. Because every dollar that enters your life does not arrive alone. It arrives carrying something else with it. It carries time, it carries effort, it carries attention. It carries moments that could have been spent elsewhere. And slowly, without noticing, we begin trading pieces of our lives for pieces of currency. This trade becomes so normalized that we rarely question it. We measure our worth by income, our progress by raises, our stability by savings accounts, and our dreams by financial targets. Yet beneath these measurements lies a quieter reality. Money is not just something we earn. It is something we exchange for life itself. Time spent in meetings, energy spent commuting, focus spent under pressure, emotions spent navigating expectations. Each of these is converted into numbers on a screen. And once converted, those numbers are then exchanged again for housing, for food, for entertainment, for security, for status, for distraction. The cycle feels natural because everyone around us is participating in it. Work more, earn more, spend more, upgrade more, and repeat. But at some point, a gentle realization begins to emerge for those who pause long enough to notice. The realization is not dramatic. It does not arrive as a crisis or a revelation. It arrives as a quiet curiosity. What if the goal is not simply to earn more money, but to live more life? What if the true question is not how much we make, but how we are using the life energy behind it? This audiobook explores that question slowly, calmly, without urgency. It is not about rejecting money. It is not about abandoning work. It is not about escaping society. Instead, it is about seeing clearly what has always been happening, the ongoing exchange between our hours and our income. When you begin to see money as stored life energy, something shifts. Spending becomes more intentional. Earning becomes more meaningful. Saving becomes less about fear and more about alignment. And perhaps most importantly, the relationship between money and happiness begins to loosen. Because it becomes possible to recognize that money is not the destination. It is a tool, a medium, a bridge between effort and experience. This perspective does not demand dramatic change. It invites reflection. It invites awareness. It invites a slower, more conscious relationship with the flow of earning and spending that shapes everyday life. Many people chase financial independence as a future milestone, something that arrives after enough saving, enough investing, enough discipline. But this audiobook gently suggests another possibility. That independence may begin not when the numbers reach a certain level, but when awareness reaches a certain depth. When you know what you are truly trading. When you know what brings real fulfillment. When you know how much is enough. The world around us often encourages comparison. Larger homes, higher salaries, faster lifestyles. Yet comparison rarely leads to peace. It leads to escalation. And escalation leads to a life that feels increasingly full, yet strangely empty. So the journey explored here is not about becoming richer in the conventional sense. It is about becoming clearer. Clear about what matters. Clear about what is optional. Clear about what genuinely enhances life rather than simply occupying it. And as clarity grows, something surprising often follows. Simplicity, not forced simplicity, but chosen simplicity. The kind that emerges naturally when noise fades and priorities sharpen. This audiobook is not meant to rush you toward any conclusion. You do not need to change anything today. You do not need to decide anything tonight. You can simply listen. Let the ideas move gently in the background. Let them settle slowly. Let them raise questions rather than answers. Because sometimes the most powerful transformation does not begin with action. It begins with awareness. And awareness begins with a simple pause to ask what money is truly buying and what it may quietly be costing. From this place of reflection, we begin. One of the most important shifts this journey invites is the redefinition of income itself. Most people think of income simply as money received in exchange for work. A salary, a wage, a payment for services rendered. But this surface-level definition hides something essential, something that, once seen, cannot easily be unseen. Income is not just money. It is life energy. Life energy is the finite amount of time and vitality available to each person. It is the hours of attention spent focusing, the emotional effort required to perform, the physical strength used to endure stress, the mental presence needed to navigate complexity. When you earn money, what you are actually doing is converting your life energy into a financial form. Seen this way, a paycheck becomes something very different. It is no longer just a number. It is a compressed representation of hours lived, effort expended, and moments spent in particular environments. This perspective invites a deeper question. How much life energy does your income truly require? Because the exchange is rarely limited to the time spent directly working. It includes preparation, commuting, recovery, emotional strain, and even the ways work shapes personal identity and daily rhythms. The cost of earning money is often broader than the hours listed on a schedule. Consider the time spent preparing for work each day, the commute, the transition into a professional mindset, the energy required to maintain performance, the recovery afterward, the subtle emotional adjustments made to fit expectations. All of these are part of the exchange. When these hidden costs are included, the real hourly value of income often changes. What appears to be a strong financial reward may reveal itself as a much larger life investment than initially assumed. This is not meant to create dissatisfaction with work itself. Work can be meaningful, creative, and fulfilling. The purpose is simply to see the exchange clearly. Clarity transforms decisions. When income is understood as stored life energy, spending begins to carry a different weight. Purchases are no longer just transactions of money, but exchanges of lived time. A new item, a convenience, an upgrade, each is quietly purchased with hours of existence that cannot be reclaimed. This does not mean that spending becomes negative. It means it becomes conscious. Instead of asking only, "Can I afford this?" a deeper question begins to emerge. Is this worth the life energy it required? Sometimes the answer will be yes. Sometimes the experience, the comfort, or the joy gained will feel aligned with the effort invested. Other times, the answer may be less certain. Over time, this question creates a subtle but powerful shift. Consumption becomes less automatic and more reflective. Desire slows down. Impulse softens. The relationship between earning and spending becomes more intentional. This shift also begins to challenge another assumption that more income always leads to more satisfaction. In many cases, increased earnings bring increased expenses, increased expectations, and increased commitments. The lifestyle adjusts upward, often quietly and gradually. What once felt abundant begins to feel normal. What once felt like luxury becomes baseline. This phenomenon, sometimes described as lifestyle inflation, is less about greed and more about adaptation. Humans naturally adjust to new levels of comfort. And once adjusted, returning to previous levels can feel like loss. Without awareness, this adaptation creates a cycle where greater effort leads to greater earning, which leads to greater spending, which leads to a continued need for effort. The cycle continues, often without pause. But when income is seen as life energy, the cycle can be observed rather than unconsciously followed. Observation introduces choice. It becomes possible to ask not only how to earn more, but how to require less. Not only how to expand lifestyle, but how to refine it. Not only how to grow financially, but how to align financially with what genuinely enhances life. This alignment does not demand minimalism. It does not demand sacrifice. It invites intentionality. It invites the possibility that wealth may not always come from increasing income, but from optimizing the exchange between life, energy, and experience. Some people find that certain expenses truly support well-being, time with loved ones, meaningful environments, creative tools, restorative travel. Others discover that many expenditures add little beyond temporary stimulation. Over time, the difference becomes clearer. And with clarity comes a new form of freedom, the freedom to decide how life energy is allocated. Work remains meaningful when chosen consciously. Spending becomes satisfying when aligned with values. Saving becomes purposeful when connected to future possibilities rather than fear. In this way, money begins to serve life rather than life serving money. The shift is subtle. It does not require dramatic change. It begins with awareness, with noticing the true exchange beneath every transaction. And as this awareness deepens, the foundation is laid for a more deliberate relationship with both earning and living. Once money is understood as stored life energy, another quiet realization begins to emerge. Spending is not simply about acquiring things. It is about shaping the life you experience day by day. Every financial decision, no matter how small, participates in designing the rhythm of your existence. Not in a dramatic or obvious way, but in subtle patterns that accumulate over time. Many purchases feel insignificant in isolation. A subscription here, a convenience there, a habitual upgrade, a spontaneous reward after a long day, each seems harmless. Each seems temporary. But over months and years, these patterns create environments. They create routines. They create expectations. And eventually, they create a lifestyle that feels fixed, even if it was never consciously chosen. Spending becomes architecture. It builds the structure within which life unfolds. When viewed through this lens, consumption shifts from a matter of affordability to a matter of alignment. The question becomes less about whether something is within budget. It's more about whether it contributes meaningfully to the kind of life you wish to inhabit. Some expenditures genuinely support well-being. A peaceful home, nourishing food, experiences that deepen relationships, tools that enhance creativity or reduce stress. These purchases often feel light rather than heavy. Others create a different effect. They satisfy briefly but introduce maintenance, comparison, or ongoing obligation. They may subtly increase pressure rather than reduce it. Without awareness, both types blend together. But awareness separates them. Over time, it becomes possible to notice which expenses feel expansive and which feel constraining. Which add calm and which add complexity. Which serve life and which quietly demand more life in return. This noticing does not require judgment. It simply requires attention. And attention allows for intentional design. When spending aligns with genuine values, satisfaction tends to last longer. The need for constant replacement diminishes. The urge to escalate fades. This is not because desire disappears, but because desire becomes clearer. Instead of seeking stimulation, people begin seeking resonance, purchases that reflect who they are, rather than who they are expected to be. At the same time, another layer of clarity emerges: the relationship between spending and identity. Many purchases are not made for utility alone. They are made to express belonging, status, or aspiration. They communicate who we are or who we hope to become. Clothing, technology, housing, travel. These often serve symbolic roles as much as practical ones. Symbols are not inherently negative. They can support confidence and connection. But when identity becomes dependent on consumption, the cycle of earning and spending intensifies. Identity inflation mirrors lifestyle inflation. As expectations rise, maintaining the image requires ongoing financial input. Work must sustain not only material comfort, but also perceived standing. Awareness allows this dynamic to soften. it becomes possible to separate self-worth from expenditure. To recognize that identity can be shaped through actions, relationships, and contributions, rather than primarily through possessions. This recognition often leads to an unexpected effect. Spending becomes more selective, not restricted, but deliberate. People may continue to invest in what matters deeply: experiences, environments, creative pursuits, while reducing expenditures that serve mainly as social signals. The result is not deprivation, but clarity. Life begins to feel less crowded by unnecessary commitments. Financial resources begin to stretch further without increased effort. Time becomes less fragmented by the need to sustain an ever-expanding lifestyle. In this way, spending becomes less about accumulation and more about expression, an expression of priorities rather than pressures. And as this alignment strengthens, the relationship between money and happiness becomes less direct. Happiness begins to arise less from acquiring and more from choosing. Choosing what to support, choosing what to release, choosing what to nurture. Each financial decision becomes a quiet vote for the kind of life you are building. Over time, these votes accumulate. They shape not only bank balances, but also daily experiences, the pace of mornings, the depth of evenings, the quality of relationships, the sense of freedom or constraint. Money continues to flow, but it flows through a more conscious channel. And within that channel, life begins to feel less driven by external expectations and more guided by internal clarity. As awareness grows around how life energy is earned and how spending shapes experience, another dimension naturally begins to emerge: the role of enough. In a world that quietly encourages expansion, the concept of enough often feels unfamiliar. Growth is praised, more is admired, upgrades are normalized, and the horizon of satisfaction constantly shifts forward. Without noticing, many people begin living in a state of perpetual anticipation. The next raise will bring ease. The next purchase will bring comfort. The next milestone will bring stability. Yet each time a milestone is reached, expectations adjust. The sense of arrival fades. A new target appears. This cycle is not driven by greed alone. 'Tis driven by adaptation. Humans adjust quickly to improved conditions. What once felt abundant becomes standard. What once felt luxurious becomes routine. The result is a subtle restlessness, a feeling that something is always slightly missing. Introducing the idea of enough does not mean abandoning growth or ambition. It means recognizing a point where additional accumulation begins to offer diminishing returns to well-being. Enough is personal. It cannot be standardized. For some, it may involve financial security and time for creative pursuits. For others, it may include simplicity and reduced obligation. For many, it lies somewhere in between. Defining enough creates a boundary, not of limitation, but of clarity. It allows energy to shift from constant acquisition toward appreciation and stewardship. Without this boundary, financial goals can expand indefinitely. Income rises, expenses follow, commitments multiply. Time becomes increasingly allocated to sustaining complexity. With a sense of enough, the direction changes. Instead of always asking how to increase income, the question becomes how to enhance life with what already exists. Instead of pursuing accumulation for its own sake, resources can be directed toward meaningful experiences, supportive environments, and long-term stability. Enough also introduces a new relationship with time. When accumulation is the primary objective, time is often compressed, filled with productivity, urgency, and forward motion. When enough is acknowledged, time can expand. Moments are less frequently evaluated for their efficiency and more often appreciated for their presence. This shift does not eliminate effort or responsibility. It simply balances them with reflection. Savings begin to represent more than future security. They represent optionality, the ability to choose how time is used. Optionality creates space, space to rest, space to explore, space to contribute. And within that space, satisfaction often deepens. At the same time, defining enough challenges another cultural assumption that financial success must always be visible. Visible wealth signals status. It communicates achievement. It aligns with shared narratives of progress. But invisible wealth, stability, reduced dependence. Flexible time often contributes more directly to well-being. Invisible wealth does not announce itself. It resides quietly in lower stress, greater autonomy, and the ability to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. Choosing enough frequently shifts focus toward this quieter form of prosperity. The emphasis moves from display to durability, from comparison to contentment, from constant motion to intentional pacing. Over time, the presence of enough can transform financial behavior. Spending aligns more closely with values. Saving feels less like deprivation and more like empowerment. Work becomes a choice rather than an obligation. Perhaps most importantly, the sense of scarcity begins to soften. Scarcity thrives in environments where expectations are undefined and comparison is constant. Enough provides definition. It reduces the need to measure success externally. With enough, decisions can be guided by internal priorities rather than external pressure. This does not mean withdrawing from ambition or aspiration. It means allowing ambition to serve life rather than dominate it. Growth continues, but it is directed toward experiences, relationships, and contributions rather than solely toward accumulation. In this way, enough becomes not an endpoint, but a compass. It helps orient financial choices toward what genuinely enhances existence. And as this orientation strengthens, money gradually shifts from being the central pursuit to becoming a supportive element within a broader, more balanced life. With the emergence of enough comes a deeper understanding of another quiet force shaping financial life: the relationship between money and fulfillment. Many people assume that money and happiness move in direct proportion. More income, more satisfaction. More spending, more enjoyment. More accumulation, more peace. But lived experience often reveals a more complex pattern. Money can remove certain forms of stress, insecurity, instability, unpredictability. It can provide comfort, convenience, and access to enriching experiences. These are meaningful contributions to well-being. Yet beyond a certain point, the connection between financial increase and emotional fulfillment begins to loosen. Additional income may improve conditions, but it does not automatically deepen meaning. Additional possessions may offer stimulation, but they do not guarantee lasting contentment. This is because fulfillment arises from sources that are not purely financial relationships. Purpose, creativity, contribution, growth. When money is treated as the primary pathway to fulfillment, these dimensions can be overshadowed. Life becomes organized around earning and consuming rather than experiencing and engaging. The result is often a sense of busyness without depth. Reorienting this relationship begins by seeing money not as a destination, but as a facilitator. Money can create opportunities for meaningful engagement, time for family, resources for creative pursuits, support for learning, capacity for generosity. But it cannot substitute for these experiences. Understanding this distinction helps dissolve the expectation that financial progress alone will produce emotional satisfaction. Instead, money becomes a supportive infrastructure, a means through which fulfillment can be pursued rather than a proxy for fulfillment itself. This perspective also influences how financial goals are framed. Rather than aiming solely for higher income or larger balances, goals can be oriented toward life quality, flexibility of time, alignment of work with values, environments that support well-being. Financial planning becomes less about maximizing numbers and more about optimizing experience. This does not reduce the importance of discipline or foresight. It enhances their purpose. Saving becomes a way to create choice. Investing becomes a way to sustain freedom. Spending becomes a way to enhance moments rather than fill gaps. As this orientation strengthens, the pursuit of money begins to feel less urgent and more intentional. Decisions are guided by what contributes to a fulfilling life rather than by abstract benchmarks. At the same time, another shift occurs. The perception of trade-offs becomes clearer. Every allocation of life energy toward earning is an allocation away from other potential uses: rest, relationships, creativity. Seeing this trade-off does not demand withdrawal from work. It invites balance. Work can remain meaningful and engaging, while coexisting with other forms of enrichment. Income can support fulfillment without dominating it. Over time, this balance fosters resilience. When fulfillment is diversified across multiple domains, financial fluctuations have less impact on overall well-being. Stability arises not only from savings, but from a broader life structure. Money continues to matter, but it is no longer the sole measure of success. This broader view allows financial choices to be integrated into a holistic life design. Instead of asking how to earn more in isolation, the question becomes how to live more fully within available resources. Instead of chasing financial milestones, attention shifts toward cultivating environments where fulfillment can naturally emerge. In this way, money moves from the center of life to a supportive role within it. And from that supportive role, it can contribute more effectively to both security and satisfaction. As money begins to shift from being the center of life to becoming a supportive structure within it, another realization gently follows: the importance of aligning financial behavior with personal values. Many financial decisions are made in response to external cues, social expectations, cultural norms, marketing messages, observations of how others live. These cues create a framework that often defines success in terms of visible achievement and consumption. Yet values are internal. They reflect what genuinely matters to an individual: connection, creativity, stability, learning, service, exploration. When financial choices align with these values, life tends to feel coherent. Actions reinforce priorities. Spending supports meaning. Saving creates space for what matters. When financial choices diverge from values, tension arises. Resources may be directed toward maintaining appearances rather than nurturing fulfillment. Work may be structured around external validation rather than internal purpose. This divergence often remains unnoticed until fatigue accumulates. Alignment begins with reflection. What experiences feel meaningful? What environments support well-being? What commitments feel energizing rather than draining? Answering these questions clarifies how life energy might best be allocated. For some, alignment may involve reducing obligations that do not resonate. For others, it may involve investing more in relationships or creative endeavors. For many, it may involve redefining success beyond financial metrics. Money then becomes a means of supporting these priorities rather than shaping them. At the same time, alignment encourages simplicity. Not simplicity imposed from outside, but simplicity chosen because it reflects genuine preference. A simpler lifestyle may reduce financial pressure. It may free time. It may create opportunities for deeper engagement with meaningful activities. This simplicity is not about restriction. It is about clarity. It reduces noise and highlights what matters. Savings within this context take on new meaning. They are no longer merely safeguards against uncertainty. They become instruments of flexibility. Savings allow for pauses, for transitions, for opportunities that may not align with traditional career paths. They provide the capacity to respond to change thoughtfully rather than reactively. Investment, too, becomes less about rapid growth and more about long-term stability. It reflects patience, the willingness to allow resources to evolve gradually in service of future possibilities. This patience contrasts with the urgency often promoted in financial discourse. Urgency emphasizes speed. Alignment emphasizes sustainability. Over time, aligned financial behavior fosters trust. Trust in one's ability to navigate uncertainty. Trust in the capacity to meet needs without excess strain. This trust reduces reliance on external comparisons. The need to match others' lifestyles diminishes. The impulse to escalate consumption weakens. Contentment becomes less dependent on visible markers and more grounded in lived experience. Life feels less like a performance and more like a personal journey. Work remains meaningful when it supports values. Spending feels purposeful when it enhances what matters. Saving feels empowering when it creates options. In this way, financial alignment supports both autonomy and connection. It allows individuals to design lives that reflect their unique priorities rather than collective expectations. And as alignment deepens, the relationship between money and identity softens. Identity becomes rooted in actions and relationships rather than possessions. This shift fosters resilience. When identity is not tied to consumption, financial fluctuations carry less emotional weight. Stability arises from coherence between values and behavior rather than from external validation. Money continues to play a role, but it operates within a framework shaped by intention. And within that framework, life energy is allocated more consciously, supporting both present fulfillment and future possibility. As financial behavior becomes more aligned with values, another layer of transformation often begins to unfold: the relationship between time and freedom. Most financial discussions focus on income, savings, and investment returns. Yet beneath these metrics lies a deeper objective that many people seek without naming directly. They seek freedom, not necessarily in the sense of complete independence from work, but in the sense of flexibility, the ability to choose how time is spent. Time is the true medium through which life is experienced. Every meaningful moment unfolds within it. And yet, time is often treated as a secondary consideration, organized around financial obligations rather than around personal priorities. When money is accumulated without clarity of purpose, time may remain constrained even as financial resources grow. Conversely, when money is managed with intention, it can gradually create space. Space to rest, space to explore, space to contribute. Savings, investments, and thoughtful spending patterns can all serve this objective. They reduce dependency on constant earning. They provide buffers against uncertainty. They enable transitions between phases of life. Over time, these elements support a shift from necessity-driven schedules to choice-driven ones. Choice does not eliminate responsibility. It enhances autonomy. It allows work to be pursued because it is meaningful rather than solely because it is required. It allows commitments to be accepted selectively rather than reflexively. This autonomy often leads to greater satisfaction. When time is allocated intentionally, experiences deepen. Relationships receive attention. Creativity finds room to emerge. The pace of life becomes less reactive. At the same time, autonomy introduces new considerations. Freedom involves decision-making. It requires reflection on how time is best used. Without awareness, newfound flexibility can be absorbed by distraction rather than by fulfillment. Thus, the journey toward financial flexibility is paired with the cultivation of intentional living. It invites ongoing inquiry. What activities feel restorative? What engagements feel purposeful? What contributions feel meaningful? These inquiries help ensure that time, once liberated, is directed toward experiences that enhance well-being. In this way, financial independence is reframed. It is not merely the absence of work. It is the presence of choice. It is the ability to balance effort with rest, productivity with reflection, ambition with contentment. Money serves as a facilitator of this balance. It supports stability while allowing variation. It enables individuals to respond to opportunities without being constrained by immediate financial necessity. Over time, this flexibility fosters resilience. Unexpected changes, career shifts, life transitions, unforeseen challenges can be navigated with greater calm when financial buffers exist. The pressure to react quickly diminishes. Decisions can be made thoughtfully. This resilience extends beyond personal circumstances. Flexible time often allows for engagement with community, creative projects, or service. It opens pathways for contributions that might not generate immediate income, but that enrich both individual and collective life. Thus, the relationship between money and time evolves. Money is no longer solely a measure of success. It becomes a resource that shapes the texture of lived experience. Time, once structured primarily by financial obligation, becomes available for deliberate design. And within this design, life energy can be directed toward what truly matters. As time becomes more consciously directed and money begins to function as a facilitator rather than a driver, a final and subtle shift starts to take form, the transition from managing money to managing life. Up to this point, the focus has been on earning, spending, saving, and aligning financial behavior with values. But beneath these practices lies something even more foundational: a relationship. A relationship not only with money, but with existence itself, with how moments are lived, how priorities are expressed, and how meaning is cultivated over time. Many financial systems emphasize control, budgeting, forecasting, planning. These tools are useful. They bring structure and visibility. Yet beyond structure lies awareness. Awareness allows financial choices to reflect evolving priorities rather than fixed formulas. It recognizes that life unfolds in phases. There are periods of growth and periods of rest, times of exploration and times of consolidation, moments of ambition and moments of reflection. Financial management, when integrated with life awareness, becomes adaptive. Resources are allocated in ways that support each phase rather than impose uniform expectations. This adaptability fosters sustainability. Instead of pursuing constant expansion, individuals can move fluidly between engagement and recovery. Instead of measuring progress solely by accumulation, they can assess it by coherence, the degree to which actions align with intentions. This coherence strengthens trust. Trust in one's ability to navigate change. Trust in the sufficiency of resources. Trust in the resilience of values. With trust comes ease. Financial decisions no longer require constant vigilance. They become expressions of established priorities. Spending reflects appreciation rather than impulse. Saving reflects intention rather than fear. Investing reflects patience rather than urgency. Over time, this ease extends beyond finances. Life begins to feel less segmented. Work, relationships, creativity, and rest coexist within a shared framework. Money flows through this framework rather than dominating it. The pursuit of financial independence transforms into the pursuit of integrated living. Success becomes less about achieving a final state and more about maintaining alignment along the way. This alignment supports continuity. It allows individuals to adjust course without losing direction. It accommodates change without sacrificing stability. It honors both present experience and future possibility. In this way, the journey explored throughout this audiobook culminates not in a destination, but in a posture. A posture of awareness, a posture of intentionality, a posture of balance. Money remains a powerful tool, but its power is most beneficial when guided by clarity rather than by habit. Life energy continues to be exchanged for income, but the exchange becomes conscious. Time continues to pass, but its use becomes deliberate. And within this deliberate use, fulfillment can emerge not as a byproduct of accumulation, but as a reflection of alignment. And now, as this listening gently comes to rest, there is no conclusion to reach, no lesson to memorize, no transformation to force. What has unfolded here is not a system to adopt overnight, but a lens, a quieter way of seeing the exchange that shapes every financial moment. Money has never been only about numbers. It has always been about life energy, about the hours lived, the attention offered, the effort extended. When that truth becomes visible, financial decisions begin to feel less mechanical and more meaningful. Earning is no longer simply accumulation. It is a conversion of lived experience. Spending is no longer merely consumption. It is an expression of values. Saving is no longer solely precaution. It is the cultivation of possibility. Nothing in this perspective demands perfection. Awareness does not require sudden change. It allows space. Space to notice, space to reflect, space to choose. Over time, these spaces become pathways. Pathways toward alignment between resources and priorities. Pathways toward flexibility in how time is used. Pathways toward fulfillment that does not depend on constant expansion. Financial independence in this light becomes less about escaping work and more about designing life. Designing days that include both effort and rest. Designing commitments that reflect intention rather than expectation. Designing futures that balance security with curiosity. Money supports this design. It stabilizes, it enables, it sustains. Yet the design itself remains rooted in awareness. Awareness of enough. Awareness of trade-offs. Awareness of what truly enhances existence. As this awareness deepens, the relationship between money and identity softens. Self-worth is no longer measured primarily through income or possession. It emerges through coherence, through living in ways that reflect what matters most. This coherence fosters resilience. When priorities are clear, fluctuations in circumstance carry less disruption. When values guide choices, uncertainty becomes more navigable. Life energy continues to flow through work, through relationships, through experiences. And money, rather than directing that flow, begins to accompany it, quietly, supportively, without urgency. If this listening has offered even a moment of clarity, allow that clarity to settle without pressure. There is no need to act immediately. Reflection itself is movement. Return when you wish. Let the ideas rest in the background. Awareness often deepens gradually, revealing itself in small shifts. A pause before a purchase. A reconsideration of a commitment. A renewed appreciation of time. These shifts accumulate. They reshape not only finances, but the texture of daily life. Until the next listening, move gently. Spend consciously. Save purposefully. Live intentionally. And remember, money is not the life you live. It is the life you choose to support.